Welcome, Helen, Harville, Lori.
Yo.
Yo.
Hello.
Yo.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yo, everyone. And we
Hi.
know that
Yo.
yo is the evolution of oi.
Oi.
So we're ready to roll. So we're very just excited to be here, Lori and I, with Helen, with you, with Harville. And our topic, as we know for today, is the world of Imago therapy and its deep underlying structures, maybe some of its hidden structures. You know, where does it come from? How does it emerge? And how does it live in conversation with the new emergent world, which is more incipient, which is the world of unique self therapy that Lori and I are developing together. You are, I think, 3 or 4 books ahead of us, but no competition. You know, Getting the Love You Want being kind of the first book that you both worked on together and you formally authored, Harville, and then you've put out together several, major books with a new one just out, actually,
Yes.
Recently. And, a number of workshops that you've done together. And so you've put out an entire world of, books on love and relationship connectivity.
Yes.
And Laura and I have begun with this world of unique self. And so what maybe I'll start is with just a kind of simple unfolding, of the unique self world as a frame in relationship to Imago for 5 or 6 minutes. Past Helen, Harville, back to Lori. Maybe we'll spend the first 20 minutes or so just kind of setting up the ground for people who haven't heard of either. And then kind of see where the conversation takes us and try and really unpack what are our, hidden structures? What are our hidden beliefs here? What are our hidden goals, that we're trying to express, elucidate, share, right, in these two systems, which are both about love, about people loving each other and love happening and acting in the world. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
So, to begin with the unique self frame, when the world exists, what do we know about the world? We know that it's here. Here we are. So we know that at some point, the unmanifest, if you will, decided to become manifest. Nothing decided to become something. I mean, the most shocking fact is that we're here.
Yes.
So that's kind of indisputable. And we know that creativity brought us here.
Yeah.
Right? That there's some creative process, and that creativity, kind of lives deeply in the world. There's a ceaseless creativity because not only in the first 3 trillionth of a second, did this creative world emerge that had within it all of the kind of source code, for all future emergence, but it kept emerging. Right? It kept emerging. We went through cosmological evolution, biological evolution, cultural evolution, and then evolution awoke to itself, kind of 4 big bangs, if you will. And then what then emerges is uniqueness itself becomes conscious. Uniqueness is a core characteristic of all form. All form is unique, nothing that's not unique. But then uniqueness becomes conscious. It awakens to itself, right? And we begin to realize that uniqueness is a structure of essence. Maybe I'll just talk about that for a minute, kind of what we mean by that kind of in its kind of hidden form. In classical Enlightenment teaching, and all great traditions have an Enlightenment teaching. You're asleep and you can wake up. So when you wake up, you move beyond, and virtually all the teachings, you move beyond your sense of being merely a separate self or an ego self, and you realize that you're in some sense a true self. And your true self is oneness. It's the old Zen joke, make me one with everything, right? When trying to get a hot dog done there, right? So it's oneness, right? I become one with everything. It's true self. I'm part of the seamless code of the universe, and the total number of true selves is 1. And so uniqueness in that classical Enlightenment teaching, paradoxically, was associated with the separate self or the ego self. And that teaching is deeply true, but partial. It's true, but partial. It's part of the story. And in some sense, it was actually a damaging teaching, because by associating uniqueness with the separate self, with the ego self, and awakening with true self, which is beyond uniqueness, so uniqueness got left behind. And that was the classical teaching of mystical enlightenment, right? And particularly the Eastern expression of mystical enlightenment, but it appears in Judaism and Hasidism, it appears in mystical Christianity. Move beyond separate self, awaken, enlighten to true self. You're one with the seamless code of the universe. But if you look deeper, both at mystical Christianity, at Sufism, you look at Kabbalah and its deep structures, you realize that there's something else going on, which is very exciting. And in this something else, you begin to realize that beyond true self, there's a next stage. That actually your true self has an irreducible perspective. It has an irreducible quality that no other true self has, even though paradoxically there's only one true self. That we're all unique perspectives of true self. That actually every true self sees through a unique set of eyes. And that actually we're each unique incarnations, right, of essence. We're each the personal face of essence, and that actually essence is not beyond uniqueness. Essence is beyond the separate self uniqueness. You then realize you're part of the one, but then what emerges from that oneness is a higher level of personal, a higher level of personal quality. So if I could just kind of outline it just for a second as a structure for our thought, kind of in level one, you've got separate self, personality, personhood, ego self, all that stuff, level one. Then you go to level two, and you get to true self, oneness, impersonal. So for example, you'll have many enlightenment societies that call themselves the impersonal enlightenment society. You're moving from the personal to the impersonal. And that's the classical move of enlightenment. I'm part of the oneness. But then level three, the personal comes back online. You actually realize that the personal quality of essence is the personal beyond the impersonal. It's not just the contraction of the separate self-ego. It's the personal face of essence. It's the irreducible uniqueness that lives in me, as me, and through me that never was, is, or will be, right, ever again, right, in the history of all that is, that awakens in me. And if we can kind of bring this together with these four big bangs we talked about, we might say something like, right, I am the unique expression, the unique incarnation, right, it's a resonant word, right, the unique incarnation of the love, beauty, and love intelligence that initiated all that is, that lives in me, as me, and through me, and that love intelligence can therefore address some moment of unlove in the world that no one else but me can ever address, and that's not a function of separate self-narcissism, right? That's not a function of grandiosity. It's not a function of an inflated ego self. That's actually a function of actually knowing who I am. I am an irreducibly unique expression of the love intelligence and love beauty of all that is, that lives in me, as me, and through me. And so that's about 3-4 minutes in. Let me take one more minute and maybe bring this full circle to the Imago conversation. So if you had to frame that kind of really simply, maybe you would say something like your separate self, the experience of separate self is you're a puzzle piece, looking for the puzzle, but oh my God, there's no puzzle. So kind of like the cartoons in your wonderful new book, like a cartoon of a puzzle piece, kind of looking for a puzzle, but unfortunately there is no puzzle. So it's kind of just moving along, and it's uncomfortableness in this world, starry, starry night, trying to kind of make its way. So that's the experience of separate self. The experience of true self, classical enlightenment oneness, there's only a puzzle. There seem to be lines separating the puzzle pieces. That's an illusion. Meditate, you'll get beyond that. There's only the puzzle. Unique self, there's a puzzle piece that's part of the puzzle. There's a puzzle piece that adds something to the puzzle that no one else that ever was, is, or will be can add to that puzzle. And the puzzle, divinity, God, if you will, reality in its ultimate sense, is incomplete without me. I'm a unique puzzle piece, which is about connectivity, meaning that my essence only expresses itself through connectivity with the larger all and unique connectivity with another puzzle piece that happens to match precisely what I need to do in order to be completed. So that in some sense, I'm only completed, right, when I actually manifest and connect as my puzzle piece essence. So paradoxically, last sentence, uniqueness is not a function of alienation. It doesn't create separateness. Uniqueness actually is the currency of connection. It's actually what creates connectivity. And so from where Lori and I are sitting, all therapeutic work, right, rests on this principle of unique self. That the realization that I'm a unique self, that I'm uniquely needed, that I have a unique gift to give, a unique life to live, a unique poem to write, a unique song to sing, a unique way of loving, living, laughing, and being in the world, that's mine and mine alone, is not a function of inflated narcissism. It's actually the true reading of my essential nature and gives me a sense of self, right? It creates a process of what we're starting to call reselfing, right? It actually allows my emergence and becomes a strange attractor to my optimum health. And that as long as I'm only working on the wounds, right? And of course I need to work on the wounds, but if I'm focused on the wounds, and I develop a kind of theory of woundology, right? Then actually they don't have enough power, right, to draw me forward. I need to do the healing work in the wounds, but I need to be drawn forward, if you will, by the strange attractor of realizing my unique self, and then ultimately the unique we, the unique relational we that emerges out of that puzzle piece connection. And that's for us, and Lori will talk, of course, later much more about it, because she is actually kind of the expert in our dyad on the therapeutic process, and having been a master of it for 25 years, right? But that's a new modality that we're using and seeing stunning results as people are kind of called to their unique selves, right, into the next stage of unfolding real wholeness and health. So that's just a frame, a frame for the conversation. Mm-hmm. And maybe if y'all, Harville, Helen, could give us kind of an Imago frame, and and we'll take it from there.
So before we do that, I'd like to make
Please.
a comment on what you just said.
Sure.
I'm not a scholar in the world of your scholarship, but when Helen was working on her doctor's degree, I began to collaterally read some of the stuff, because her degree was in church history, about Macrina. Mm-hmm. And so I had two thoughts while you were talking. One was, I now really understand why I have been viscerally uninterested in, and in fact even objected to, a classical spirituality. I remember feeling annoyed, angry, and like I don't want no part of disappearing.
Right.
That I'm me, and if I have to not be in order to be, then I'd rather be the me that I know than losing myself in the great all. And that was never of any interest to me. So I essentially never paid any attention to Eastern mysticism, because I thought it was pathological.
Right.
As a therapist, when you want to move toward a sense of self and dignity and identity and so forth. And that was also a problem, because that's the separate self that becomes alienated, isolated, and so forth. So there was a kind of, so I went into the healing world to try to deal with that pain and suffering of being a separate self, but I was unwilling to help people dissolve into the no self or the non-self. And I've just, as Helen knows, I read stuff like that, or go to workshops, or Omega, I look at the courses, and it's like, I'm not going to any of that. But what you just said reminded me of Macrina, who was the sister of Basil and Gregory, who were the founders of the Orthodox Church.
Eastern Orthodox.
Eastern Orthodox Church. And you probably know this better than I do, that Macrina, the story is, actually wrote their theology for them. But because she was a woman, she couldn't get the credit. But they were dealing with the Greek metaphysics about what happens when you die. And in Greek metaphysics, you return, your atoms return to the great sea of atoms, and so you have no identity. So it's like, that doesn't interest me. So just like, I've always felt that feeling, when I die, if I'm going to disappear, who cares? Right. But I'm more, but she said, no, what happens is that every molecule, every atom that makes us has our imprint on it.
Right.
And it is distributed back into the great sea of atoms, but at the resurrection, when we're all called to come back together, all of those atoms that made us have our imprint on them, and they will all be reassembled into the resurrected body. And that's the only, I remember reading that and following what you were doing, and it's like, this lady's got what I like. If you're going to die, and at the resurrection, you're going to come back with some sense of identity, some sense of memory that this was you, then that makes sense. But if you're just going to disperse, who cares when the resurrection comes? I'm done.
Yeah, no, it's so...
Am I making sense? I know it's a superficial and sort of petty reaction, but I finally got it. And when you talk about the unique self, as all that, that is, that you move from the separate, isolated self to the true self, where there is simply emergence into that. But we are not an incarnation of that. We are the incarnation of a unique form of that.
Right.
And I was telling Helen this morning when we were reviewing your work that God gets to look at it. God gets to look at God's creation through the multiplicity of the eyes of the individuals that are created.
That's unique self.
So God gets to see everything through a multiplicity of visions and all the multiplicity of forms. that was the first time I felt like, okay, I get it now. I can embrace that. I can settle into that.
awesome.
So in fact, I got that when you were talking right now. I got that better than I got it in the reading, and that feels viscerally, just like, yes, that's cool. But the other stuff,
That's wonderful.
you can keep it. Don't want that.
Yeah.
So, so there is a bridge into Imago, and I'd be happy to pick up on that, or you
go.
pick up on that.
I like you starting.
Well, well, you call Imago couples, Imago relationship therapy. We also call it Imago couples therapy when we focus just on couples. And the reason we like that is that we think, as far as we know, that Imago is the only couples therapy that was co-created by a couple. I'm not sure how long John and Julie Gottman were together before, because I think John was in research and Julie was in therapy, and then they finally came together. But Helen and I were present at the creation of Imago. It began with a conversation, basically, on our first date, where we began to talk about what I was doing, what she was doing. And I was interested in couples, and she was interested in couples. We had both divorced. We were both, at the time we met, not looking for anybody. In fact, I had declared hands off on women for all time and would never marry again until I met Helen, and then here I was involved and intrigued in this conversation. So it was only about 5 years later that Imago actually emerged as a intellectual system that was worthy of a name, and then we named it, went through a whole process of what are you going to call this, and came up with the word Imago, which is basically the Latin word for image, and it refers to what we inferred from listening to couples was the image is a mental set of memories. Structure may be too strong, but certainly a collage of memories from childhood that are not necessarily attached to too many events, because most of the important memories occur before the age of 4, before the hippocampus becomes, the library of memories. So they're all emotional memories, but there's a collage of emotional memories about caretakers. And that the selection process, and this is in your mind, and the selection process that's the experience of falling in love is the experience of those memories being triggered unconsciously by a perception of someone across a crowded room. You move toward them. You don't really know why you're moving, but you know you got to meet that person. Something is going on in which there's a match of personality with the collage that we call the Imago, and that's the selection process. Romantic love, you fall in love. I can't believe I met you. You're so wonderful. I can't live without you. We seem, like we're so one, and why don't we, and so forth. So our work has been understanding what happens when that goes away. The question that was our research question was, why do couples fight? Why does romantic love die? And so we began researching in about 1977, got really serious about interviewing couples, and for the next probably 6 or 7 years, kept bringing that question to the therapeutic arena and bringing the question home, the therapeutic arena, back to our conversation to begin to put together a theory of selection, an understanding of why romantic love dies, and what is the conflict all about. That is, conflict is not about conflict, it's about something else. Obviously, conflict is an objection to some state of being that you want changed. So what is that state of being? So we saw conflict as growth trying to happen. And then we began to continue to evolve theory about how do you account for the yearning people have for that romantic state, and that we finally arrived that romantic state is actually the most important thing any human being can experience, because it is a taste of the elixir of being itself, of unique self, it's a taste of our essence. It is a taste of connection, and when you experience that connection, you experience joy. And so that's sort of a real sort of summary across the board, and I want to fill in some stuff.